If the Nazis would have built this bomber, it could have literally changed the entire outcome of World War II. This was the Amerika Bomber, a strategic project by the Nazis that they wanted to use to bomb New York City. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Ryan here. We're going to be talking about the Amerika Bomber. It was a bomber that was a concept bomber that the Nazis wanted to create to strike America. They wanted it to make a round trip all the way from Germany, drop bombs on New York City, and then go back to Germany. This could have literally changed everything for the tide of World War II, but ultimately it was thwarted and taken down before it could actually become a real program. So at the very end of this video, I'll tell you why it was taken down and some theories as to some clandestine operations that may have been responsible for the Nazi bomber never coming to fruition. The goal of the Nazi bomber was for it to leave Germany and do a 7,200-mile round-trip mission in which it would drop multiple 2,000-pound bombs on strategic targets in the United States. Various proposals were put forward for the concept of the Nazi bomber, and it's noted that even in Hitler's private diaries, he fantasized about seeing New York City going up in flames. In 1937, Willy Messerschmitt, who was the owner of an aerospace manufacturing company in Germany, put forth an idea to create the Amerika Bomber. He wanted to win a lucrative contract that the Nazis had put out as they sought to create the Amerika Bomber that could reach New York City and do a round trip, 7,200-mile trip. And in 1938, the Luftwaffe's commander-in-chief, Hermann Göring, he gave a speech saying, "I completely lack the bombers capable of round-trip flights to New York with a 4.5-ton bomb load. I would be extremely happy to possess such a bomber, which would at last stuff the mouth of arrogance across the sea." As you can see, even though this general didn't have the ability to come through on this promise, he had no problem talking trash. And one strategic thing that's worth noting is that the Azores became the linchpin for this mission that Germany wanted to create. They wanted to set up a strategic bomber base in the Azores where they could do routine bombing missions of the eastern coast of the United States. And at the time, the Portuguese Prime Minister was actually allowing German U-boats to refuel in the Azores. But then eventually the British came around and were like, "Hey, Portuguese Prime Minister, what are you doing, bro? Stop that." So the Portuguese Prime Minister did stop allowing that and then allowed British forces to refuel there. So with that, Germany would have had to retake in the Azores and basically claimed it as their own prior to setting up their strategic bomber base. And things got real in 1942 when copies of the plan to build the Amerika Bomber were actually released to 10 different aircraft manufacturers in Germany. This is when the plan actually got teeth, and the German Luftwaffe was basically saying, "We're putting our faith in these 10 aircraft manufacturers and we're going to get this done." And in those strategic plans, it was noted that the plan wasn't just to hit the American homeland. The plan was to continually bombard strategic targets in the United States to perform a couple of objectives. Those strategic targets were the Chrysler Corporation in Michigan, the Colt firearm manufacturer in Connecticut, and Pratt & Whitney aerospace manufacturers in Connecticut. They wanted to take out the ability of the United States to enact war on the Nazi Empire. But also they wanted to continually bombard the United States so that the US had to pull back strategic anti-aircraft weaponry from Europe to protect its own homeland. And the theory was if they were continually protecting their own homeland, they wouldn't be able to protect strategic sites in Europe, and Germany and the Nazis could continue to advance their blitzkrieg of Europe. Let's talk about the design that was put forward for the Amerika Bomber, and it's worth starting with some strategies when it comes to building any bomber, and these strategies apply to modern times as well. There are stand-in and stand-off bombers. A stand-in bomber in modern times would be the B-2. This is a stealth aircraft that can fly basically undetected and stand in the battlefield, be right over top of the battlefield, and release their weapons. The standoff bomber in modern times would be the B-52. This aircraft doesn't have any stealth capabilities, but it can stand off, meaning it has a massive range, and then from that massive range, it can extend its range with standoff weapons like air-launched cruise missiles, air-launched intercontinental ballistic missiles, which give it the ability to reach out and touch targets without putting itself in harm's way. The Nazi Amerika Bomber would be a stand-in bomber. Due to the technology at the time, they wouldn't have stealth, but what they were thinking was put a bomber up high enough that anti-aircraft fire couldn't reach it, and it would be able to stand in on the battlefield and hit these strategic targets in New York City and along the American eastern coast. The concepts were based on a lot of the Allied strategic bombers of the day. The big picture was to make it a tricycle setup with a landing gear coming out of the nose, and big picture for it to have massive engines and the ability to travel that 7,200 miles while carrying 2,000-pound or more bombs. 3 prototypes were eventually put forward, and they were based on the design of prior strategic bombers of the Nazi regime. The first prototype was the Me-264, but what they determined was they just couldn't get enough fuel on board this aircraft and give it the legs to reach that 7,200 miles. Additionally, this concept was put forward by the Messerschmitt Corporation, which was focused on building fighters. So as they started to transition to building this Amerika Bomber, they reduced their ability to create fighters, and the Nazi regime basically told them to knock off the bomber concepts and focus on building more fighters for the German Luftwaffe. The next concept that was created was the Junkers Ju-390. 2 prototypes of this bomber were created by attaching an extra pair of inner wing segments into the wings of the Ju-290 and adding new sections to lengthen the fuselage. So as you can tell, this was basically like strapping Legos onto an already modified aircraft, and it just didn't work. The next concept was the Focke-Wulf TA-400. The Focke-Wulf TA-400 was a large 6-engine heavy bomber design that was developed by Nazis in 1943 by the Focke-Wulf Corporation. It was a serious contender for the Amerika Bomber project. This was probably the most advanced bomber concept built by the Nazis, but due to the complexity and the lack of technology at the time, they just weren't able to advance this past a wind tunnel model design. And the last serious concept was called the Heinkel HE-277. This was a 4-engine long-range heavy bomber design, and it was a derivative of the HE-177. The HE-177 was produced by the Luftwaffe during World War II. The main difference that the Germans tried to adapt from the 177 to the 277 was to beef up the engines. The HE-177 used 2 Daimler-Benz DB606 power system engines, each of which consisted of 2 combined Daimler-Benz DB601 engines. The engine technology at the time wouldn't allow them to beef up these motors and have them essentially keep from ripping the airframe apart with the power that they would produce. So again, this design never made it out of the wind tunnel. And it's worth saying that at this stage, the deteriorating state of the German war machine was not able to produce anything that could actually become the Amerika Bomber. The Allies were destroying the German capability to make war and create new concepts. And this may be the scariest part of all, and that is some of the prototypes were actually flying wings that resembled the modern day B-2 bomber. Given more time, more resources, and less bombardment from the Allies, and the US's decision to enter into World War II, the Germans no doubtedly would have made progress into what was the flying wing, and this aircraft had the most potential to actually reach the US homeland. This flying wing was designed by the Horten brothers. It was called the Horten HO-18. It was a flying wing powered by 6 turbojet engines, and it was based on experiences with an existing HOX design. The Arado company, also working for Germany, suggested a 6-jet flying wing design, the Arado E555. Now, this means that given that more time, we may have been facing the precursor to the stealth bomber coming out of the Nazi Empire. The German war machine also suggested rockets with wings, but these never came to fruition. And then it's rumored that the British spy services actually infiltrated multiple projects that were creating this flying wing and other potential concepts for the Amerika Bomber, and were able to thwart these concepts from within. And then it's rumored that these plans of the flying wing were actually delivered to the British Empire, and some early British aeronautical corporations actually considered using the flying wing design for modern airliners. So at the end of the day, it's great to see that the Allies came together and thwarted what could have been a game changer in World War II, but turned out to be a strategic win for the Allies, preventing the Amerika Bomber from ever taking flight. Thanks for watching this video, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and hey, check out another video. It would mean a lot if you would do that. Have a great day. We'll catch you on the next video.